What up YouTube? Glorious Battle is back and I'm going to break down how to play this event if you're a smaller account and you want to maximise the rewards you can get while playing on logistics mode so you don't have to risk too many troops. I'm not going to go into detail on the attacking or defending trees because I think anyone who is watching this video for tips probably does not have a strong enough account for that to be a good idea. You are almost certainly matched up with whales that will wipe the floor with you no matter how effectively you play if you try that. That being said, one of the first tips I'm going to give you is always send one march to every battle that your alliance participates in. This gives you 100 contribution points, which will let you progress through your logistics skills significantly faster. All you have to do is send 10,000 troops, preferably of tier 1 or tier 2. You'll get your 100 points even if you immediately get kicked right back out. The second tip I would have is, unless you're a complete free-to-play player, you should definitely consider picking up the Honor Pass for the 2 weeks that Glorious Battle is on. It increases your total daily obtainable skill points to 600 rather than the base of 200, which lets you progress so much faster, and it'll make you significantly more effective and let you help the team out more. So logistics generally falls into two broad categories. You can either produce resources or you can transport resources. Well, you can do both, but the skills fall into these two broad categories, so it's best if you focus on one. There is also construction, but everyone can do that, and it doesn't generate all that many points for you. You'll probably have to spend excess bugles on it, because especially if you're focusing on trade, because you will not be able to spend all of your bugles on trade. So the first way to earn points is with trading. This produces resources for your faction. There are different sized buildings that you can trade in. You've got large merchants, medium merchants, small merchants, and then there's your faction capital. As a general rule of thumb, trading in the largest of these that your faction has is a good idea, because they each have a different base efficiency, which is how many resources they produce per hour as at a base level. So for example, as you can see here, this medium merchant produces 12,000 resources per hour. The small one produces 9,000 resources per hour. The team's capital only produces 6,000 per hour. And if you have a large merchant city, that produces 15,000 per hour. The total amount of resources you produce is just this base efficiency multiplied by 100% plus efficiency bonus. You can get efficiency bonus from your personal skills, from owning caravan stops, or from buildings within the merchant city itself. That will get you your final resources per hour, and that is then just multiplied by the trading time to get you the total amount of resources you'll produce. For every 4,000 resources you produce, you will then earn 1 contribution point, which, as long as you're below your daily cap, will also earn you 1 skill point that you can start to use to unlock more skills. Transporting resources, on the other hand, is significantly more simple. You just get 1 contribution point for every 7,000 resources that you transport. It doesn't matter how far the resources are going, it just matters how many you are sending. But that does not mean that you should just transport all the resources to the closest buildings. While that would get you the most personal points over a given time period because you would march faster to closer buildings, it would really annoy your team because they need these resources in specific locations so they can build upgrades, or sending them to fortresses so that they can send marches from those fortresses so they're more effective in battle. And then the final category was construction, which just earns you a flat 25 points per bugle spent on construction. Every trade started, bundle of resources sent, or construction aided will use one of these marching bugles. You get some from each of your faction's buildings. They just slowly build more bugles for you over time. You can only have 30 of them stored. So one trick I would recommend you do is when you're getting marching bugles from world progression, or from progressing in your personal contribution, you can save the rewards that have marching bugles in them until later when you need them. This way you don't end up going over your 30 cap accidentally and wasting the production. This is mostly relevant if you're focusing on trading, because if you're just transporting resources or doing construction, then you will be able to spend the marching bugles far faster than they are produced, probably. So now let's move on to break down skills. These generally fall into 3 or maybe 4 broad categories. The first and most important is these Q expansions. These increase the number of marches you can send at once. As a base, you can only send 2. There are 3 skills which can each increase this by 1, so you can send up to 5 at once. This greatly increases the amount that you can help the team. So I would definitely recommend starting by just getting 3 levels in each of these skills on the right so you can progress all the way down to this Q expansion as quickly as possible. From there, where you should focus depends on what you want to do. If you want to do trading, then focusing on these phenomenal profit skills is most important, I would argue. They increase your trading efficiency, meaning you're generating more resources per hour, which is the best way to help your faction. There are 3 of these, each with 5 levels, and I think each level gives 5% trade efficiency. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since the last GB, but I'm pretty sure that's the number. So you can get 75% extra resources just from that, which is a huge boost. Then there is the confusingly named efficient trading, which does not increase your trade efficiency. What this does instead is increase your single trading time. So your one bugle means you're trading in a city for longer. I would argue that this actually has a minimal impact on helping your team out, because for the most part there will be people waiting to start a trade as soon as you finish your own trade. So you're not actually producing more resources for your alliance by using these trading slots for longer. You're just getting more of the resources yourself. Obviously this means it does help out your personal contribution, but still not by all that much. Because as long as you are there to start a new trade when you finish, it just means you're spending one less bugle to say you've got your trading time up to 12 hours rather than 8 hours, then you're doing 2 trades a day rather than 3. Obviously, if you're going offline for a long time, then increasing the trading time does help out a fair bit there. But of the two, I would definitely say focus on efficiency first at the very least. You then have transport skills. I would argue that you should focus on transport carrier first. This increases the number of resources that you can send with each march, which means that you will be moving more and generating more contribution points for yourself with the same number of bugles. There is then the rapid transport skills. I would argue that these aren't particularly useful. They mean that you can march faster to each building, but for the most part, this isn't all that relevant. You will not be generating more resources per bugle, you'll just be spending your bugles faster, which if you're focused on transport is not going to be a problem for you. You will be waiting for bugles to generate rather than trying to stay below the cap. The fourth category of skills, if you want to call it that, are these ones at the bottom here. First you've got first aid. This reduces the casualties that your alliance members will take, or rather everyone in your glorious battle team. But I believe this only applies if you have a march in that battle. So while it sounds great at the surface level, I'm sure your team would appreciate not having deaths and having everyone go to the hospital instead, I think that its use case is fairly limited. If the battle is intense enough that they're taking the amount of losses that this will actually help them, then you're almost certainly going to be getting kicked out before it really makes that much of a difference. And if the battle is not intense enough for you to be getting kicked out, then they're probably not taking enough losses for them to really care about this. It also comes at the bottom of the skill tree, so you don't get there until pretty late into the game anyway. Next you have Inspired and Impassioned. This increases resilience limit, which again is something that you do not care about at all as a logistics player. The resilience just helps your troops be more effective in fighting while you're actually in battle, but if you're sending 10,000 tier 1s like you should be, then they're getting kicked out no matter how much resilience you've got. And the last skill here is Cavalry Spearhead. I would argue that this is not particularly useful. Being able to send resources to any building regardless of whether or not your alliance has a path to it might sound great, but for the most part your alliance will not be able to defend these buildings. So sending resources there will just result in those resources being lost when the building is inevitably conquered. The one potential exemption to this is fortresses. If you send resources to fortresses, you can still march from that fortress if that fortress is isolated, which means they could potentially march from that fortress to defend another isolated building. I don't think that this is a particularly good use case, because if the fortress is isolated, then they'll probably attack the fortress first rather than any buildings that it's adjacent to, and even if they don't, only sending marches from the fortress is not a good way to win a defense, so you're probably not going to help the alliance out that much by sending resources there anyway. So which of these paths should you actually choose? I would argue that trading is the best path for logistics players. These caravan stops can also increase your trading efficiency by 10%, which can make it even better. And there are buildings to give up to 30% trading efficiency, I believe. So it is very, very easy to get your trading efficiency over 100%. That doesn't take much at all. You can get 75% from your skills, you can get 30% from buildings. That's trivial, which would mean you're generating 30,000 resources per hour if you're trading in a large merchant city. This is 7.5 contribution per hour, or 60 contribution over an 8-hour trade. If you're focused on the skills which increase trading time, you can push that up to a 12-hour trade and be looking at 90 resources, 90 contribution per marching bugle. If your alliance is particularly dominant and you've got a lot of caravan stops, you can end up pushing that number well above 100. So you're getting more contribution for a single trade than you get for participating in a battle. The only people that will be generating more contributions per marching bugle will be the mega whales who are killing millions of troops with every single march. However, there is one big downside to trading, which is that it takes at least 8 hours, up to 12 hours, maybe longer, depending on what skills you've got. This means you're going to struggle to spend all of your marching bugles doing that. It is also reliant on you being able to get trading slots in these large buildings that have the good efficiency. If you can't do that, then your maximum efficiency drops way down. But if you are able to actively watch for these slots coming open, this is still what I recommend you focus on. It lets you get the most contribution per marching bugle, and you'll still have a bunch of marching bugles left at the end for the last couple of days when the fights get really intense, so you can transport resources where they needed at that point, because you will probably have more skill points than you can spend on maxing out trade efficiency. So you can use them to also increase your carrying capacity, so you're still pretty good at transporting resources as well. If you are not so active, however, I would recommend focusing on transporting resources. You can do this significantly faster, so if you say you're on 30 minutes a day, first thing you do, log on, spend 5 marching bugles sending resources to wherever your faction currently want them. Go and do whatever your daily tasks are, come back, send some more, do whatever else you're doing in your half an hour, and then you can probably get a third batch off before you log off. Being able to spend 15 marches in 30 minutes is a great way to make sure you're not wasting marching bugles and to maximise your personal contribution with the limited time you have in game. And this still really helps your alliance out. Getting resources to fortresses is one of the most important things for winning battles, both offensively and defensively. And that basically just leaves construction in a very distant third place. You get 25 points per marching bugle, you can't speed it up no matter what you do. So I would argue that this is just only do this if your faction has no resources left to transport and you're near the cap, or you need something to spend your marching bugles on quickly. Obviously, construction does need to be done, because if no one's doing it, then it hurts the entire alliance. But there are enough people who don't care about playing efficiency that, in my experience, the buildings all get done even if you choose to completely ignore them. And if you do this logistics pretty well, you can easily get into the top 500, maybe even the top 200, and secure yourself a bunch more blessing stones and extra SS troop medals, which are really quite hard to come by. So it's definitely worth putting in the effort as long as you've got the time in game, I would say. So thank you guys for watching this. That's basically everything there is to say about logistics. Let me know if there's any numbers that are confusing you, if you want any of them broken down further. If anything particularly interesting happens in this series of Glorious Battle, I may well make videos on it. If not, then I will see you when All Out War starts, whenever that is.